The station was loud, too loud. Iron wheels grinding against iron rails, hurried footsteps striking against the floor, voices overlapping like broken glass. Yet, in the chaos she stood still. Her suitcase leaned against her leg, its fabric frayed at the corners, the zipper trembling each time the cold air rushed in through the half-open doors. Her fingers tightened around a red scarf. It wasn't wrapped around her neck, though the winter begged her to wear it. She only held it, twisting the fabric, wringing it like a secret she didn't want to spill. Her eyes kept chasing faces that blurred past her, strangers brushing shoulders without apology. "Where are you?" she whispered, but her lips barely moved. The announcement board flickered above, letters breaking into light, then dark again. She looked up, eyes searching the arrivals, and in that small moment her body swayed, as if she wasn't sure if she wanted them to come or to stay away. Her hands shook. She pressed them against the handle of her suitcase to steady herself, but the tremor stayed. The cracked watch on her wrist ticked unevenly, mocking her with a rhythm that refused to match the pounding in her chest. She remembered how they had smiled once, standing in the same kind of crowd back when belonging felt easy. How they had held her credit card with a grin saying, "We'll build something together." She remembered believing it. But now, under the harsh station lights, the memory burned. The scarf slipped a little from her fingers, brushing the floor, catching the dirt and dust of 100 rushed feet. She bent to pick it up, her knees weak, and for a second, she saw herself reflected in the silver edge of a passing suitcase. Small, tired, carrying more weight in her silence than in her luggage. Her phone buzzed. She didn't move to answer. The screen lit up with a name she couldn't look at. She pressed the scarf against her chest instead, closing her eyes for a breath that refused to steady. "Why am I still here for you?" The train doors opened with a hiss, steam spilling out like a sigh. People flooded forward, some leaving, some arriving, all of them moving. She stayed, frozen in the middle, her hair catching in the draft, her eyes fixed on the doorway. Every shadow that stepped out felt like it could be theirs. Every moment stretched too thin, ready to break. And then her chest tightened. She saw them. The scarf nearly slipped again, her knuckles white from holding on. She didn't move toward them. Not yet. She just stared. And the noise of the station fell quiet inside her, leaving only the sound of her own pulse. Aching, desperate, waiting for something she couldn't name. The scarf still clung to her fingers, wrinkled from her grip, a shade of red that looked louder than she ever felt. She remembered the day she bought it, on sale, tucked in a corner of a street market. Her father had teased her for choosing something so bright. "Red means fire," he'd said, handing her the coins back then. "Wear it when you need courage, not when you're hiding." Now it felt less like fire, more like a wound. Her suitcase stood heavy by her feet. She had carried it before, years ago, through bus stations that smelled of dust and engine smoke, through rooms she rented for a month, sometimes less. It wasn't just luggage, it was a witness. It had seen her unpack with hope, then repack with shame. Every scar on its corners was a reminder of the places she left too soon, the promises she couldn't hold on to. Her breath misted in the cold air of the station as families collided around her. Children squealed when they spotted their fathers. Mothers pressed trembling hands to their mouths before running forward. Lovers kissed like no one was watching. She wasn't part of that choreography. She was the still point in a dance that kept spinning without her. She pressed the scarf against her chest. Not warmth, just pressure, something to hold her bones together. In her mind, numbers ran wild. The rent she hadn't paid. The bills she had postponed. The credit she had handed over so easily, because she wanted to believe that love was an investment, not a debt. They had promised her she wasn't alone. And she had clung to that promise, pouring herself into their dream until there was nothing left to keep her afloat. Now even standing upright felt like defiance. She exhaled sharply when she noticed someone watching. Not them, not the one she had been waiting for. A stranger further down the platform, leaned against the cold railing. His gaze wasn't curious in the way strangers usually look. It was steadier, quieter, like he had been watching for a while and chose not to look away. She shifted, uncomfortable, dragging her suitcase an inch closer. The cracked watch on her wrist caught the light, reminding her that time was slipping, her train, her chance, her choice. But her feet stayed rooted. The crowd thinned. Her pulse did not. And then there, the familiar shape of the one she had been searching for, stepping onto the platform with the same unbothered ease that had once charmed her. Their eyes scanned the crowd, not rushing, not searching as desperately as hers had. Her scarf trembled in her hand. She thought of her father's words. She thought of the suitcase filled with her compromises. She thought of the stranger's silence, still watching. When their eyes finally met, she almost smiled. Almost. But then she stopped, halfway between welcome and retreat, her lips parting with a hesitation that burned more than certainty ever could. The air shifted before the words did. A low hum of thunder crawled across the sky, muffled by the glass roof of the station. She tightened her scarf against her chest as though the sound had touched her ribs. The crowd was thinning now. Families peeling away into taxis, lovers disappearing hand in hand. But the stranger stayed. She tried not to look, but her gaze betrayed her. His shoes, worn to their seams, leather cracked in patterns of endurance. His jacket, too thin for this kind of weather, carried a faint tear near the sleeve as if it had lived through storms of its own. And when he shifted, she caught a glimpse of a photograph pressed into his wallet, just barely peeking from the fold. A face she couldn't see, but a presence nonetheless. He noticed her eyes linger, and for a second, the silence between them tightened. He didn't hide the photo. He didn't turn away. It was almost cruel, the way life sometimes handed you mirrors without warning. She saw herself in him. The tired edges. The unspoken weight. The way survival left its fingerprints on the body, on the soul. Her cracked watch ticked louder than the thunder now. Each uneven beat a reminder. Her train, her escape, her unfinished goodbye to the one who had stolen more than money. She should move. She should step toward the platform doors and not look back. Instead she stayed. The first drop of rain hit the glass roof above. Then another. Until the whole station trembled with the downpour. The sound was heavy, endless, drowning even the loudspeakers. Her suitcase wheels trembled against the tiles as though urging her forward, but her body betrayed her again. Her eyes flicked between the two figures, the one she had been waiting for, moving carelessly through the station as if nothing had ever been broken, and the stranger still watching. The tension split her in two. One part of her whispered, "Go. Don't look back. Don't repeat the same story." Another part trembled, "Stay. Maybe this silence is safer than the promises you believed before." Her pulse raced. She could feel her own breath ricocheting inside her chest, hot against the cold air. She thought of her father's words of fire, of courage. But she also thought of the debt, of the loneliness, of the way her own reflection had grown sharper, smaller, in the silver edge of suitcases. The rain hit harder, running down the glass, distorting everything she saw, faces, lights, even choices. She stepped forward, then stopped. The scarf slipped lower in her hand. The stranger tilted his head slightly, almost a question, almost a warning. And she stood in the storm of it all, unable to tell if this was the start of her escape, or the beginning of another trap. She almost left. Her suitcase rattled as she dragged it toward the exit, the wheels stuttering on the uneven tiles, echoing like bones in the silence between thunderclaps. Her pulse hammered, urging her forward, urging her away. But halfway through the glass doors she stopped. Something inside her tightened like a knot that refused to break. She turned. Just one last look. The scarf slipped from her fingers again, this time not by accident, but as if her body had surrendered the strength to hold on. It landed in the puddle forming near the platform edge, its red fabric darkening as the rainwater seeped in through the gaps above. And before she could bend to retrieve it, he did. The stranger. He lifted the scarf with quiet care, holding it as though it were something fragile, not fabric. His eyes didn't leave hers, not even when the water dripped down his sleeve. For a moment the scarf was no longer hers. It was a message passed between them without a single word. Some people carry more than just bags, she thought, her lips barely moving. They carry silence. And his silence was louder than any promise she had ever been given. A child tugged at his mother's coat nearby, whispering too loudly, "Why is she just standing there? Why isn't she going?" The mother hushed him, but her glance lingered, soft, pitying, the kind that stung more than cruelty. Another man, older, shook his head as he passed, as if to say, "You should know better by now." The judgment wrapped around her like smoke. She wanted to scream that they didn't know, that they hadn't seen the nights she had spent counting coins, or the mornings when her chest was too heavy to rise. But her voice stayed locked in her throat, trapped behind the same fear that had built her silence. The scarf was still in his hands. He didn't move closer. He didn't hand it back. He only let it hang loosely at his side, as though waiting to see if she would reach for it, or let it go. Her chest ached. The cracked watch ticked on her wrist, uneven, reminding her she was wasting time. Behind her, the glass doors hissed open again. Another train leaving, another chance slipping. She stepped forward, then stopped. Her shoes squeaked against the wet floor. Her reflection fractured in the puddles at her feet. His eyes followed her, calm but piercing. The kind of gaze that made her wonder if he knew too much, or nothing at all. The scarf swayed in his hand, its red brighter against the storm. And she realized she didn't know if he was holding it out to save her, or to keep her. The scarf was still in his hand when her phone buzzed again. Same name on the screen. Same weight in her chest. She didn't move to answer. It wasn't the call that mattered anymore. What mattered was the way he finally broke the silence. "You dropped this." His voice was low, steady, almost kind. But when he extended the scarf toward her, she noticed something she hadn't before. An embroidered set of initials stitched faintly into the corner. Not hers. Not random. And when he saw her staring, his jaw tightened just barely. "It belonged to my daughter," he said.
No hesitaschen. No embellishment.
Just truth, raw, unshielded. Her breath caught. The red, her father's fire, suddenly carried a second life. A memory she had never known but was now forced to hold. She hesitated before taking it back, fingers brushing his in the smallest, most electric of contacts. "Some people carry more than just bags," she whispered to herself, echoing the thought she had clung to minutes earlier. But now it meant something else. The silence wasn't only his, it was grief. And then, like a cruel shift of fate, she saw it. The envelope sticking out from his jacket pocket. The company logo stamped clear in blue. The one she had rehearsed her interview for just yesterday. The one she had walked into desperate, trembling, only to be dismissed with polite indifference. Her pulse stuttered. "You." Her words fell apart. "You own it." He didn't answer right away. His eyes met hers, and in them, she read confirmation without confession. The room tilted inside her mind. The debt she had carried, the credit she had given away, the nights she had wondered if she was worth investing in. All of it suddenly pressed into this single moment. He wasn't just a stranger. He was the door she had been pounding on. And yet, he carried silence like a weapon. Or maybe a shield. Her cracked watch ticked unevenly, mocking her again. "Time doesn't wait for you," it seemed to say. She thought of her father's voice, of the scarf's fire, of the moment she had almost left through those glass doors. All those echoes folded into now. There was no return. She couldn't walk back into the same life. Not after knowing this. So when he turned and began walking, not toward the exit, but toward a side corridor marked authorized only, she followed. One step, then another, her suitcase trailing behind like a shadow she could never abandon. The scarf burned against her chest. And when the door clicked shut behind her, she knew she had walked into something that would change everything. Whether salvation or ruin, she couldn't yet tell. The corridor was colder than the platform, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above. Her footsteps echoed against the tiled floor, each one heavier than the last. The suitcase dragged behind her like an anchor, its wheels catching on cracks, refusing to glide smoothly, as though warning her. He didn't speak at first. He simply walked, measured, sure, until they reached a door at the end. He paused, hand resting on the handle, then turned toward her. "You remind me of her," he said. His voice didn't shake, but something in it felt unfinished, like a note that never reached resolution. She clutched the scarf, her father's fire, his daughter's memory. The threads felt alive between her fingers. "Your daughter?" she asked. He nodded. The faintest motion, but heavy enough to break her chest open. The silence between them filled with ghosts. She thought of her own father's words, of the cracked watch ticking too loud, of nights spent believing in promises that collapsed like paper houses. "Is that why?" Her voice faltered. "Is that why you're here?" He studied her face as though searching for pieces of someone he had already lost. "Not for love," he said finally. "Not for anything you could give me. But for the way you hold on, when everything tells you to let go." Her throat burned. For a moment she hated him for saying it, for reducing her to a reflection of someone else, for turning her pain into his memory. And yet, beneath the anger something shifted. A strange relief, a strange clarity. She had never been chosen for who she was. Not by her partner, not by life. And maybe not even now. The scarf trembled in her grip. She looked down at it, wet from the rain, carrying 2 stories, 2 wounds. Then, without another thought, she pressed it into his hands. "You need this more than I do." It was her sacrifice. Not to cling, not to keep, but to release. The scarf, once her fire, then her wound, was now a bridge she refused to stand on. His fingers closed around it slowly, reverently, as though she had given him something far heavier than fabric. His eyes softened, but not in love, in recognition. Around them the storm outside roared louder, the thunder shaking the glass windows of the station. For a moment it felt like the world itself was tearing open, demanding her choice. She let go of the suitcase handle. It tipped, falling sideways with a dull thud. For once she didn't rush to pick it up. Her cracked watch ticked unevenly, but she no longer measured herself by its rhythm. When she turned away, she walked not toward him, not toward the doors, but into the unknown space between. Each step unsteady, but her own. Behind her, the scarf remained in his hands, brighter against the cold light. The station was loud again, the sound of trains, footsteps, voices. But inside her, there was a quiet she had never known before. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay. But some leave you changed forever. The rain had stopped by the time she stepped outside. The air smelled clean, almost too sharp, as though the storm had rinsed the city raw. Neon lights blurred on the wet pavement, their reflections trembling under her footsteps. She pulled her coat tighter, but not for warmth, just to feel her arms holding something, even if it was herself. Her suitcase rolled behind her, quieter now. No longer an anchor, more like an echo. She didn't look back at the station. She didn't need to. The image was already sealed inside her. His hand holding the red scarf, her father's fire now resting in someone else's story. And strangely, the thought no longer ached. It only hummed. At the corner of a dim cafe, she stopped. Not to enter, but to look through the fogged window. Families gathered around chipped tables, lovers leaning into each other. A man alone scribbling into a notebook. The scene was ordinary, almost forgettable, but to her it was proof. Life continued, with or without her scars, with or without her debts. She sat at a bus stop bench, her reflection faint in the glass beside her. The cracked watch ticked unevenly, but she no longer pressed it to her ear. Instead, she slipped it off and laid it gently into the side pocket of her suitcase. The past could rest now. Her hand shook once as she reached into her coat pocket, half expecting to feel the scarf. But it wasn't there. And the absence, what once would have broken her, felt like release. She whispered as if speaking to the night. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition. The words floated, soft, fragile, but they stayed. She remembered the stranger's silence, his gaze like a mirror she had been afraid to face. She remembered her father's voice, the fire he had told her to carry. And she remembered her own choice, the moment she had let go, not out of weakness but strength. A bus pulled up, its headlights spilling across her shoes. She didn't rush. She simply rose, her movements unhurried, as though time itself had loosened its grip. She stepped inside, chose a window seat, and let the city slide past in fractured reflections. Her eyes stayed open, not for someone to arrive, but for herself to keep watching. The night grew quieter, the roads thinner, the world softer. She exhaled, the breath steady this time. Not every ending is a door closing. Some are just a pause, a space where the heart learns to beat differently. And sometimes the question isn't who stayed or who left, but what part of yourself you finally chose to keep.